Hi, I'm Coach MK, founder of the Fitness Protection Program. I'm a run coach, not a life coach. We're never really talking about the running. Running is the tool. It's the conduit we use to examine the world we live in, as well as its impact on our own lives and the lives of the people around us. How we react to certain people and to certain stories tells us a lot about how we view ourselves. I'm committed to the thoughtful, intentional exploration of the importance of running so that no one discounts their own badassery, ever. Final note, this podcast is geared towards every runner who won't lose their home, livelihood, or health insurance if they show up to the corral with a hangover. Not that I'm encouraging you to do that, just saying. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the Fitness Protection Podcast. Hello, Coach Sarah.
Hello, Coach MK.
How are you?
I am hanging in there. Sundays mean I have been, parenting 24/7 for, for the last day and a half. It's been kind of nonstop. And, we started a sticker chart yesterday. I'll put it that way. That's when you know that, shit is going down. Yep. Coming from me, a sticker chart is an act of desperation.
For real, we have one. It was our sitters helped us implement it like 3 weeks ago. And I had never wanted to do it because it's more work for me. Now I have to remember and keep track of all of this for 4 children. No, not happening. But with all of us pitching in together, it's kind of possible. But I totally feel you. A lot of these things, it's just so much work. And I shudder to say that because, I shouldn't be afraid of hard work, but there's only so much hard work you can take on at any given moment.
And hard work versus smart work, that's really where it comes. For me, I only want to work hard on something that I know is going to, be a net positive. And I honestly, and my child has a very strong will. You've seen her in the in the Facebook Live videos doing strength. You know this.
Yep.
And so now we're on day 2 and she's definitely already in gaming the system mode. And I tried to make it as gaming the system proof as possible. And I tried to make it really concrete and specific. This is the behavior that we are trying to get to. It's only for this one behavior. It's not for good behaviors in general. It's for this one thing, which is, by the way, going to the damn bathroom when you need to go to the bathroom and someone says, go to the bathroom. Why is that such an issue? Why do we have to have a fight about it every single time?
Right.
So that is what the sticker chart is for. She gets to put a sticker on it. When I say, hey, you're crossing your legs a little bit. How about you go pee real quick and then you can come right back to what you're doing? She's like, no! And then she has an accident. So
I've done that.
Haven't we all?
I've done it as an adult.
Yeah, I get it when it's an inconvenience to have to stop what you're doing and go break your concentration for a few minutes. I get it. But I'm also I don't want to sort of make it into a thing where it's just and this is what we're going to talk about, I think, a rule for the sake of a rule that I am then forced to be all rulesy rules about when I know that it's actually not really in anybody's interest for me to be enforcing this right now. I don't want it to get to that point. So I'm trying to keep it as contained as possible. And this morning I was out for my run and my husband texted me saying, Roz is guzzling water right now so that she can pee as much as possible and get all the stickers. I'm like, well, great. So.
And that's kind of what we want to talk about today, too. It's is the system you're creating providing the right incentives to get you what you want? It's something to think about. As a person living with ADHD, and I've been pretty open the past 10 days talking about my treatment and my ongoing management of it. Thank you. I've really loved the responses. The emails have been overwhelmingly positive. And every time someone says, I feel like this was really helpful. Someone was even I have a degree in this and a child with this. And I thought I knew what I was doing. And then hearing you explain, I think it was on the day I bought 3 of the same shirt. No, because I just prepare to fail. But I do a lot of things like that. I'm okay with failure. If I view it as a personal failure, then I'm going to be stunted, right? But it's okay, got it wrong. And identifying the situations like the sticker chart where I can't do that. If success and discipline, something really important is going to hinge on a sticker chart, I'm going to fail. Let's hinge it on something else where I can succeed. Okay, guess what? You just lost because there's like one sticker and it's like you there or it's not. This is the mommy sticker chart. It's binary. Not everything in this life can be a binary function. But getting TV, not getting TV is. So it's a magnet, actually. And I'm like, okay, I'm moving the magnet for that. All right, magnet's back. So, because like that time at the end of the day after bath time, there's a 20-minute window and you can get it or lose it. And it's like, the closer it is to the end of the day, the more you have to do to earn it back once it's gone. So watching that kind of like binary function has been really helpful with 4 kids rather than, okay, did you brush your teeth and make your bed and do all these things that like, the sitters put it together because they're like, we don't want to do these functions. And I love that they're acting as a team and reinforcing as a team and I'm part of this chain. And I'm just looking at it like, I cannot because I don't do those things. And like, I've had to start making my bed because, they now have to make theirs. And like, but mommy doesn't make her bed. And I'm like,
I don't make my bed. I read an article about why it's better not to make your bed. And I read like 2/3 of it and I was like, sold. I don't need to make my bed.
I'm just saying,
I'm good.
An excuse is a reason stripped of justification. So if you have justification, then you have a reason. Do it. Yes. Go find that reason.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it was backed in science.
It sounded like it. Someone sent me a link. It looked good enough. And I was like, this is exactly the reason I have been looking for. And I will take it and run with it. And it's great. I have not looked back.
Perfect. Oh my gosh. Well, one of the things that I like to say, not everything in life is a binary function, but some things can be, and just knowing where the line is between yes and no, and like, do you really need to be close to that line? Can you afford to be close to that line? I feel like that is, for me at least as someone, an adult with ADHD, that's a more helpful way to look at things. When you accept you're going to screw up, it's like, which parts of my life can I afford to be close to the line where if it goes over, I'm okay, versus which ones need to stay all the way over here. At some point, everything will slide into that binary. You have it, you don't. And that's, for me, is the name of the managing game. Not did I check everything off the list, but how close am I to losing things I care about? Yeah, which sounds really, like, kind of sad and dark, like, how close am I to losing everything? But it's more like, okay, what is the worst that can happen if my bed isn't made? I don't get a sticker. Right. Okay, what is the worst that can happen if the kids don't eat? They're not going to sleep. That's not good. You know what I mean? So... Anyway, what's the worst that can happen can feel like a dare in the wrong hands, but in the right hands, it can actually be the sole motivation you need. Because a kid who doesn't care about their grades now is not going to start caring about their grades because their grades are bad. If, for me, it was... My parents had no stick to hold over my head. I was weird. I was a weird little kid. I was hyperactive. I was pretty smart. I was doing advanced work, and I got skipped grade and then put back in my class, and then I stuck out like a sore thumb no matter what I did. My only way that was ever going to change was if I left my small town. I just promise of moving somewhere else and starting over. You could be you instead of who people tell you are. So they never had to have the grades conversation with me because everything in my life was geared towards getting me out and as far away as humanly possible. That in and of itself is such a different dynamic of what I see people doing with their kids and what I feel like is going to work with mine, because my kid's life, so far, it's not terrible. We live in a big city. If we don't like what goes on, we can change schools. School choice is a thing. There's not one school in the whole county that serves their age group. Because we have so many options, it's just a different decision matrix. And there are moments where I'm like, whew, so the first 17 years of my life were terrible, but in some ways it made the whole rest of my life a whole lot easier. I don't know. I can't imagine what it's like in Boston. I look at my friends in New York and I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, it's different here. At least what I know of New York and like the whole private school competition, and also like the divide between certain public schools and certain other public schools, I think is really vast in New York. Like the best schools are amazing and the most underfunded schools are in terrible shape. Boston has a little bit of that going on, but I don't know. We are lucky enough to be in one of the towns that has good schools. By, like, anyone would agree, good public schools, but they're not, like, the super good school districts that everyone wants to be in. Those are the towns, like, where I go running.
And see, that's so funny to me. I guess this is a pretty good entry point for, like, where I wanted to go with it. So, totally. All right, so in 1994, little me in Smith County, Tennessee, I attended the Tennessee Governor's School for the Sciences. I was the first kid from my area selected to go to the Governor's School for the Sciences, and I didn't know why until I got there and realized I couldn't do any of the courses, because Governor's School is like for gifted kids who have been identified as gifted and talented or in magnet programs, and they're all brought together to, it was supposed to be like a marketing for our state school system. and how like you can actually achieve really amazing things at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And it looked good on, college applications. Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting there in classes, like with their engineering department being like, wait, we got to build a what? Out of how do you know how to use that function on your graphing calculator? I don't need it for another
calculators.
I still don't know how to use one. I never had to. Like, we did everything by hand. And the one class that had graphing calculators, we weren't allowed to use them on tests because of the save function where you could save answers and things. So, which is not to diss on it. I learned a lot. Mm-hmm. And that helped me out later in a totally separate conversation about how I managed to major in business with like a terrible background in math. So I get there and realize, like, at the ripe old age of 14, that I could never become like a biomedical engineer. If I was really serious about it, I would have to take at least 1, maybe 2 years worth of bridge courses at like the community college to get ready for the first year of work. And frankly, I didn't really want it that badly. It's just like, how did I excel in everything to have to go take courses that were remedial, courses that people around me at Governor School had taken in like the 9th grade. Whew. I mean, I had no idea how far behind I was, that I wasn't even like, I'm playing wiffle ball and they're in like, Major League Baseball. So this is kind of like why to this day I laugh when people are like, I just don't want my kid to be behind. I'm like, I don't think you know what behind looks like. Let me tell you a story. At Governor School, we had these exchange students from Russia. And in many ways, like, they were kind of easier to communicate with than anyone else I met, because I didn't know what an AP class was, or that the SAT had like, there was a second SAT to later find out, oh, that's multiple SATs, all subject tests. None of this. I had no idea. I had to drive 3 hours to take an SAT. It wasn't offered anywhere near me. Like, that's how, like, rural it was. It was I ended up taking it because it was easier. My parents weren't going to let me drive that far by myself. So I ended up taking it on a college tour much later, so after that. So at the end of this, I know, right? Crazy. And there were no prep classes around me. I didn't know people took those. They just weren't, no one was coming to teach them in Smith County. I get it. But with these exchange students, like, we almost spoke the same language of, I don't know what everybody else is doing. So at the end of the summer, we were told that the organization, the Citizens Exchange Council, that had sent these students over, would be sending kids to Russia the following summer. I applied and was accepted. Again, we'll never completely understand why. I'm guessing that being friends with the kids had something to do with it. But I'll never forget the orientation that we received before getting on the plane. The first time, by the way, I ever got on a plane. The college tour happened later that summer. First plane, they were like, don't be surprised if you walk into a store, because we're in Rostov-na-Donu, which is a little, a college town, kind of like Knoxville. It's the Knoxville of Russia. So, like, we're in the Knoxville of Russia. And, like, so if you walk into a store and people won't sell you things, just remember they don't have to. There's no concept of commerce. They get paid whether the business makes money or not. They have incentive to show up and get their paycheck, not to, like, do stuff. So it's not weird to walk in when somebody's sitting down and you're like, may I have some bread? And they're like, нет хлеба, нету. And, like, you're, like, looking at the bread, but they just don't feel like standing up, or they don't like you. They don't have to serve you. There's just that. So you can get really mad about it and yell, which is going to do you no good, because this is a small town. Or, and I got that because I'm from a small town, or you can get up and go to the next place and hope that the person's standing up. It can be frustrating, but there's nothing you can do about it. So if you were to look at this situation and see Russians as lazy, you'd be missing the point. The people weren't the problem. It was the structure. The incentives of jobs in the Soviet Union were the problem. The structure of government was the problem. It wasn't about commerce and making things happen. If you want to understand the culture and the people, like, you got to look at what they're working with the structures that they're navigating, the immutable forces that are bigger than them that shape their lives. And a second big piece of that is what shapes their life, and ours as well, is where their power comes from. Everybody has a little bit more than they think they do. And for that woman in the chair, the power that she has is the power to say no, and the power to resist. That is her active resistance, is to not serve me. So if you walk in and you're like, they say, no, we don't have any, even though it's right there, they're just enjoying what little power they have. It has nothing to do with you. It probably has to do with whatever else is going on in the moment, or what they're going home to. Don't worry about it. Don't make it a thing. Just get out, because that is you exercising your power. I'm like, okay. So that is kind of where my interest in economics and business emerged, how to align incentives in ways that work. There are always bad apples, but once you have a lot of bad apples, it's probably a crappy system. So, this is my hot take on millennials. This is why I defend them. They're calling out crappy systems all over the place, and I'm not mad about it. Coach Sarah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Because also remember, when you think about who ruined low-fat yogurt, all I can say is you're welcome for that.
Yep.
Because low-fat dairy is bullshit. Sorry. No, I mean, this is like, this totally aligns with my experience in Italy. Italy is not Soviet Russia, but it has, historically, there are a lot of interesting commonalities. The Italians and the Russians were aligned at one point, and Italy embraced communism pretty hard after the Second World War because they needed to convince the whole world that they were no longer fascists. And that distinction went kind of uninterrogated for a pretty long time because, you know, it basically they just needed to make the gesture of anti-fascism as big as possible. And that seemed like a good idea, but what it actually happened because of it is that no one talked about fascism. No one talked about it. No one wrote about it. Anyone who did write about it, their stuff just did not get widely published or circulated. There were authors in Italy writing novels about fascists that did not paint fascists in a, like, basically, if you're going to write about fascists, they got to be the villains, they got to be evil, they got to be, like, all Mussolini all the time. Whereas, obviously,
they can't be normal people that got swept away in a system bigger than them, and where it was a survival skill.
Right. Those authors who were... Right. Those authors who wrote about people that were maybe aligned with the fascist party, but had stories that might have given you a different perspective on why they were in that position. Authors writing those kinds of novels got completely blacklisted in Italy, but in many cases, they got translated and published outside of Italy, because the rest of the world was interested in hearing those stories. There were a couple of authors that I did some research on. I was mostly a medieval scholar when I was in grad school, but I did do some 20th century literature, and it was really interesting to kind of learn about how this worked. And another way that this worked was the fact that Italy in the fascist era did some pretty bad shit in Ethiopia and Somalia and Libya, and they really did not want to like look back at that era and examine that. I mean, they used tear gas in Ethiopia. Mussolini was determined to own Ethiopia and called it his own. Oh yeah, but their whole like line of defense was like, oh well, but you know, the Dutch did a lot worse stuff, and we didn't really even succeed in colonizing Ethiopia. And that's true. They did not really succeed in colonizing Ethiopia at all, but that's not for lack of trying. And, but the result is that, like, you were not allowed to teach that in classes. You were not allowed to, like, write about it and get it published. This is only the sort of public intellectual reckoning with Italy's colonial efforts in that era that's only really started in like the early aughts, the early 2000s, is that people started actually publishing essays and started studying this stuff. And now there's a huge resurgence of like studying migration, immigration, emigration in Italian history that was just not allowed for a super long time because there was an unwillingness to really kind of unpack and examine what was going on in fascist Italy and be kind of okay with the fact that it happened. I don't know if that makes any sense, but yeah. I was really glad that I got an opportunity to study some of that, and my husband and I actually went to Ethiopia because I was so fascinated by it, and I really wanted to kind of go there and see sort of what do you still see any of the like marks left over from Italian attempts at occupation there, and it's a really big part of their history. They talk about it. They have museums about it. Wow. Italy's still catching up.
So is this girl from Carthage, Tennessee that's like, wow, really? So, like, again, when people talk about, like, I'm worried about the schooling and then the best school, I'm like, my high school, I'm not going to diss on it. It does a wonderful job for what it's intended, but putting me against kids from, like, the bigger schools was never going to happen, right? Like, I felt like even coming into, like, when I remember the first time I saw the SAT 2 subject test, they're like, well, which classes are you good at? I'm like, I'm really good at history. Except that, wow. The breadth of what you're required to do, like on the history AP, yeah, we've covered like maybe 2 pages of it. Yeah, no, thank you. So it's just kind of amazing. Like, what's high school for? Like a really broad base of knowledge that will help you narrow down later. And like, anyway, I guess it was wide but shallow. In my case, I had no idea about Mussolini in Ethiopia.
Well, there are writers, and this is the last thing I'll say, and then my tangent can wrap up. But there are actually a lot of really amazing writers that have been, now that this well is kind of, this dam is opening a little bit. A lot of writers that have direct experience living between Italy and these countries, Somalia, Ethiopia, and have experiences to share, and are really amazing writers, and their writing is being published, and there is an audience for it, as it turns out.
Right.
I think I talked about this a couple weeks ago. There was a course that I taught that really kind of looked exclusively at those authors and what they were saying and kind of really tried to consider their perspective as one of the important perspectives of the 20th century, one of the central perspectives of the 20th century. And those novels are being translated into English. And so I think there really is an opportunity for people outside of Italy to kind of join in this conversation. And it makes me really happy. I mean, this is why studying literature mattered to me and matters to me. That's why I got a degree in it, because I really do think that it's a big, important part of being willing to have the hard conversations. It opens a door to that.
Because it's not always that binary of good versus evil and right and wrong. We all exist in shades of gray. Like how when maybe Mussolini knew that he was doing some not good stuff by trying, or anyone who's tried to colonize another country. At the same time, like whatever justification that they use, that turned their excuse into a reason. And that's happened a lot. At what point does that become wrong or bad? Like that slide, I think, is important to watch, because it could be any of us at any point. When you think about, to pivot to cheating a little bit with that framework, it is not always black and white. And that's one of the reasons why Lance Armstrong's story was like, it made you so angry, it made everyone so angry. Like, it is absolutely clear. There is no argument you could make that injecting your veins or swapping out your pee during a race is okay. Some, like, the way that EPO has to be administered is so flagrantly, like, against all of the rules. You are cheating on not one test, but multiple tests. It's just like, whoa, that is so out of bounds. You can never argue it's okay. The only way you can argue it's okay is to say, and he did, why are you coming after me? Everybody's doing it. But when you're only coming after me, are you really fixing the system? And I'm like, ooh, sorry, he has a point. Caster Semenya, she was banned from competing this week. Like, her career is over. And I think of, like, she's only the fourth fastest in the world. When you look at the people that were ahead of her in the world tables, and there's some questions that we're going to have to ask ourselves. Like, we're ejecting this one woman, but look at all the others that we're allowing to stay. Are we really improving the sport this way? Like, that's really... And then when you take a look at, like, the stories that we want to believe, like, yes, that's cheating, because some would say that Castor was cheating, that she had, like, an unfair advantage. We need a level playing field. I don't really know, as someone with ADHD that needs to take a medication to function within a band that people consider to be normal, I don't know what an even playing field looks like, other than I can't function on a totally level playing field, and the medication I would have to take to play there automatically would disqualify me in a lot of sports. Adderall, there's no waiver in the NFL or the NHL. So does that mean, like, with ADHD that there are certain sports I can never compete in? That feels discriminatory. So I don't know what right or wrong is, but how we go about reconciling it is a big deal. And this is why Maria Sharapova matters. I don't know. Do you remember much about her story? Did you follow that when that happened?
A little bit, but I would like for you to refresh my memory, because I don't remember the details right now.
Okay, she was taking a drug that she argued was medically necessary called Meldonium. And Meldonium, she'd been taking it for 10 years. It's a drug that was made in Latvia and has not yet been approved for any use by the FDA in the United States. It is widely used in other countries to widen your vessels and aid in blood flow. So there's certain heart conditions that would justify its use. In her case, it was a big family history of type 1 diabetes. And, her doctor testified over and over, and I don't have enough medical knowledge to know if it holds water, but all it took was one person on this side saying, like, no, we would never assign it for that here. Boom, like, down comes the hammer. Also, earlier that year, the Meldonium had been added to the list. You want to take a guess at how many drugs are on the list, or how many substances are on that list? Ooh. So Meldonium was added to the list, and it escaped her entire care team. Wow, which sounds like, how did that happen?
It's
Just take
pretty
a stab.
Big list, I would think. 100?
192.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just to think a little bit, did you take DHEA or any sort of supplement while you were pregnant?
I took kind of the classic prenatal vitamin. DHA was part of it, yeah.
Was it? Okay, you're sure?
Yeah.
Okay, then you were probably doping.
Well, it wasn't running, so...
DHEA is absolutely on the banned list. And
yeah.
If you go through the list, like, there's a line, too, with some of the supplements that you can take that, like, creatine, banned, because that helps you build more muscle more quickly. That's an unfair advantage. So something that we would take, the casual person would take as a supplement, like, that we can buy in Whole Foods is you can buy it in Whole Foods. You can buy it in GNC as well. There are a lot of things
stuff
on
in
this.
Whole Foods. Supplement section's crazy.
anything in Whole Foods. So where's the line between supplementing, smart supplementing, and evil cheating? I don't know that it's always that clear. If you and I could accidentally buy it at Whole Foods, like we are not, like the chances of us sitting on top of a mountain and doping the way that Lance Armstrong did, is like too silly to be like, is this really what you two went to Italy to do? I just wanted to see how he did it by experiencing it myself. Like, though we like to joke that it would be really nice to take a pill and be magically good at this, that's just not how any of these work. And when it comes to something like EPO, it's not like one shot, boom, he's Superman. He still has to do the work and put in the training. Where's the cutoff between those supplements you can get and the EPO, other than the way that you have to take it? I'm not saying like this to excuse him, but rather we act as though there's this binary, easy, hard, definitely not, when in actuality, I would think like everyone came down on Maria Sharapova, like you should have known it was added to the list. When you look at the changes to the list that year, I can understand her not clicking the link. Oh, that's complicated. I've got people for that. And the people failed her. And then she got a 2-year ban. Yes, it is a drug that can be abused, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't. She'd been taking it for a decade. Like, rather than like she definitely did it because we're not guilty till proven innocent. I don't feel like in this case where it's flipped, like you are guilty until proven innocent. In these cases, outside of the U.S. court of law, which was what, even though it's not a justice system per se, and it can be really maddening, it is kind of what makes our justice system so interesting, because it is absolutely, theoretically, innocent until proven guilty. So when she has to go up trying to defend yourself from a presumption of guilt, it's really hard to do. And that's what Maria Sharapova had to do. No one was going to believe that there was ever a legit reason to take this drug because no one does it in the United States. It's not approved by the FDA. So what does doping look like when a drug is medically necessary, Sarah? Does this mean that like somebody with a family history of diabetes or heart disease shouldn't be allowed to take life-saving medication if somebody who does not have that same condition could take it as a performance-enhancing supplement? Who do we exclude when we make these rules?
Right. Well, you exclude like anybody it's very ableist. Like anybody who needs a medication of any kind, and I guess the reason for that is that we can't trust that people aren't just gonna like fake a medical diagnosis to be able to use a drug. And maybe that's true. I don't know. But it is really ableist. I mean, there's some sort of purity to like being able to function normally as a human without the assistance of any medical device or, drug or supplement or anything like that. Yeah, no, I have opinions about that. I have family members who do have to take medicine regularly in order to function pain-free in their everyday lives. That's a real thing. I feel like I have, over the past several years, several people really close to me have gotten different diagnoses of autoimmune disorders. And when you have an autoimmune disorder, you are taking that drug for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And if all these substances are banned in competition, right, can you say with certainty that you are not taking anything on that list of 192 supplements right now? Because that's the argument. It's not showing up on race day. If you're showing up with it it's not about what you do on race day. It's about what you do during your training. So if you're taking, say, Meldonium during your training and it's out of your system by the time you show up to compete, you were giving yourself the advantage during all of the training with performance-enhancing supplement, right? So that's where it all gets kind of fuzzy. Well, now you need a purity test, and only the purest of the pure can ever participate. Like, because now you have to prove, like, your medical exemption, and that gets, again, a little touchy. If you've ever had to fight an IEP for your kid or had to get a 504 plan and tried to convince people to enforce it, which is a maddening thing, those are there to make sure that your child can function in a room that's paid for in part by your tax dollars and is promised to you. This is like, now your kid has to go into the world. You've gotten through all that, and now they have to prove it again in a different scenario. Like, you've got to let me stay. I need this. I've been doing it my whole life. At what point? Well, what if you didn't have the resources until you joined the NFL to get the diagnosis and the necessary treatment? Like, that's a little elitist and classist to penalize people that weren't able to treat something until later in life. There's no easy answer to any of it, but I can't be anything other than sad for Maria Sharapova. And there's a part of me that, feels a little sad for Armstrong too, which is not the same as excusing him. It's not the same as excusing her. But I have to wonder, in an era now where there are forces that are sort of ready to call out cheating in absolutely totally non-elite runners, that has a lot of implications, but for me or for you, it's almost a deterrent. Well, if I go and get really, really good and then, or I finally reach my goal, now my goal could be taken away from me. The reward could be taken away from me. Like,
publicly shamed.
Yeah. I mean, because God knows I'm not looking at the list of 192 before I show up. It feels like that only applies to elites. But until I qualify for Boston, I qualify for New York. And then at what point does someone decide that what I'm doing is an advantage or what you're doing? So that's why I went kind of public with it now. Adderall is on a prohibited list. There are no waivers, no exemptions that are available in most of the major sports leagues, as I said earlier. But when it comes to professional running, they've already had this conversation. As long as it is not in your system on race day, then you're good. But considering how short the races are for someone in the elite corral, that doesn't have huge implications. For someone that's going to take longer than 3 hours to run a marathon, or longer than 2.5 hours to run a marathon, the implications are pretty big, especially for a race that starts at late in the day. So
seriously. So that's the thing, like, when I think we're going to get into this a little bit more specifically, but when I really think about this, thinking about the Facebook Live that you and Alex did talking about rules, like, when do you decide that this is so harmful to other people that it's time to pull out the list of 192 and find the infractions and nail their ass to the wall? Like, really?
Totally. And especially in a world where we know that nothing is really private, right? So if there's a photo of me standing in my kitchen and you see the protein powder behind it, is that enough to be like, is that the gotcha moment? It has been for some. That's already happened. If I have a podcast and I talk about like what an amazing day it was, and someone then turns around and like uses those words against me to say like, actually what she's doing is bragging about breaking a rule and that I'm irresponsible for not being aware of that rule. I don't know. There's just something about that unilateral application. A rule is a rule is a rule is a rule is a rule. And anytime a rule is broken, it's cheating. And anytime someone cheats, it's wrong. I'm like, that just feels like spiraling logic, not to sound too extremist, but it feels a whole lot like the finger pointing that went on in Soviet Russia and then probably under Mussolini as well. Like, to save yourself or to like sour grapes can turn into something, I don't know, really, really ugly. Are you actually improving the integrity of a sport, or are you settling a personal score? And is there no mechanism to stop you from doing that? I don't know.
Yeah, it bums me out. This whole thing, and I hadn't thought about it in these terms until you started talking about Adderall and what this could mean for you and your goals and what you want. Like, you tell everybody that you coach to be real with what they really want, be willing to have a conversation at least with themselves about what the secret goals are. And like the idea that could get taken away from you, that makes me really sad. Because as everyone has been saying, as you've talked about this in your various, videos on Facebook and that kind of thing, there is no one with more integrity and more desire for the sport to be a good place than you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I also want it to be something, I've always said it's the most egalitarian sport in the world. It's one that you can pick up later in life and be really good at, and I love that. And there's an 86-year-old man that there's a story I was reading on a website. Not the one I'm sure everyone is thinking of right now. There are multiple websites like that. That one just happens to be the only one you've heard of. There are multiple ones that exist, depending on your demographics. So there was an 86-year-old runner that started taking a steroid for his lungs so he could breathe, and felt so good breathing that he decided to walk, felt so good walking, he decided to jog, realized that there were only like 3 people in the country competing in the 400 in his category, and decided to go see if he could win, and he did, and subsequently was taken away from him for doping because someone said, hey, he cheated, he's taking a steroid. And the steroid was like on the list. He didn't know it, so his career is like over before it started with that taint around it. That doesn't feel okay to me. That to me is the opposite of what sport is supposed to be about. It's one thing when professionals are doing it. The Kara Goucher story is heartbreaking. Hearing the way Steph Rothstein talks about what she knows she's up against when she goes out there, that's heartbreaking too. But what's heartbreaking about that is very different than the rest of the race, because there are always 2 races going on at the same time. Like, even in the New York City Marathon, you got 55,000 runners. There are maybe 1,000 in the elite corral, maybe 100 in the men's and 100 in the women's pro corral, and then 53,000 some odd people like you and me just out there to have a really good day. And God knows how many people standing behind each one of them ready to point a finger and say, actually, and then take that win away from them. Anyone can make a claim. Anyone can complain. Anyone, theoretically, there's no process, none that's really public and clear and clean anyway. And who's to decide? The race directors don't have time or money to pursue year-round drug testing in the 100 men and 100 women in the corral. We know that it's been really hard to contain at the professional level for a variety of reasons, because you don't know who's going to show up on race day a year from now. So all that to say, like, I don't know where the line is or what a hard line looks like. It bothers me a whole lot more because there's money and there's a lot more on the line for a pro, and we kind of want the pro sport to be clean. But until we've cleaned that up, I'm not okay with going after an 86-year-old world record setter is still a hobby jogger. He's not getting paid for that. He's not. Latoya Snell, she's at the back, but she's got sponsors. And she attracts a lot of the wrong attention by being someone at the back that has sponsorship. And I'm sure that's pissed off all people that are really close to the front and were just a fraction of a second too short to get money. That has to hurt their feelings. And I get it, but that doesn't make it okay to go after her in any circumstance either. She's, to my knowledge, and I've been following her for a while, we're friends. We're acquaintances, rather. I've never seen her misrepresent herself. If anything, I've seen like a whole lot of me in her. She curses a lot.
Yeah. I love her, and I love the way she talks about the work that she does, and I love the way she's willing to engage with people, and, you know, it's exhausting for her to kind of continually have the same conversation with everybody about why she's out there, why she's doing what she's doing, but she does it, and I think that what she's doing is a huge net positive for people who feel seen by her, and people who feel like because she's there, and because she is creating a place for herself, maybe there'll be a place for them too. And I hate that her visibility got used against her that way.
Me too, because I'm just waiting for, my visibility has been used against me a lot as well, nowhere near the level of her, but it feels like every time it is, that's a deterrent for the people who would begin. You're invalidating not just her, but you're taking down a whole lot of people that you probably aren't competing with in the first place. So I've alluded to the times that people have made comments to me about during my year of hardship and how that fell on people close to me. It's a lot of it was my husband. Like, well, God, what do they think of me? Like, what am I supposed to be? And I'm like, that's not fair. It's fallen on some of my closer friends and my one-on-one clients, people whose names I don't say out loud because they're not public figures and they don't want to be drawn into this. But because their proximity to me, those comments, those criticisms of me and what I'm not doing, if I'm not allowed to be not okay, are they allowed to be not okay? That's the central question. Like, what do we really want? We want honesty and perfection at the same time in every person. And I feel like that's an impossible, unfair standard that I'm not ever going to reach. I can be really honest. I'm not going to be perfect. When I say I'm flawed, I'm not like bragging about being broken. What I'm saying is I'm not going to perform perfection for anybody. And I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to apologize and I'm going to fail. And I'm going to try to make things right in any place where I can. You're not going to catch me like injecting anything in my arms on top of a mountain or like faking a pee test because I'm never, that just seems like a whole lot of work. Honestly, my ADHD, I couldn't remember all the things necessary to make that happen.
It's funny, whenever my husband and I have conversations about like what it would be like to have an affair, we both come down to like, you know what? It sounds like a lot of work. Like all the deception, all the lies. I mean, maybe it would be fun for a minute and like exciting and, you know, scratch some itch or whatever, but the rest of it sounds terrible. And so,
yeah.
Until we get to a point in life where we both have a lot more free time, I don't think either of us is too worried.
It's like,
I don't mean to make light of that, but
no.
Truly, I mean the deception and like breaking rules and then hiding stuff from people.
It's just easier to do the work.
People don't do that. Yeah, it honestly is easier to do the work, and people don't do it unless there is a really compelling reason, not necessarily saying good reason, but like compelling sort of forces where it's like you always say, you know, look at the why. Why is someone going to all of this trouble to inject EPO on a mountainside?
Or ride a bike to like fake the Garmin data. Like, and
seriously.
We saw that in a half marathon not too long ago. I think it was the wife of some famous sports person. And I just think that's kind of silly and sad. You know, I look at that and go, oh man. And I get that there's a lot of crazy stuff happening. Like you can hire somebody to run for you to get you a spot in Boston. Okay, that's cheating. But anything that you did to get to the start line, to the finish line, and you did it on your own, and you weren't riding a bike, and you were on your own 2 feet the whole time, and you managed to, like, get the time that you came for that would get you somewhere else. Anything else before that, I don't really care if you took creatine. I don't care if you took DHA. I don't care if you have an albuterol inhaler, because you probably need that to breathe. I don't know if you've ever taken albuterol. I had to briefly while I lived in Texas.
No, thankfully.
It did not make life easier. It just meant I was able to breathe. It jacked my heart rate up so high, it slowed me way down. But that's on the banned list. That's on the banned list of competition. If you have asthma, being a professional marathoner is almost going to be against you, because albuterol is you can't take it the morning of the race.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can take Adderall to get through your day, but you cannot take it the day of the race. So there are a lot of day of drugs that would not categorically exclude everyone. But I'm just waiting for people to start arguing about, like, well, if this professional league doesn't do it and this doesn't do it, then what are we doing? And where's the end? What does a level playing field look like? To what does cheating look like? And does every rule broken constitute cheating, constitute dirty sport? And do we really even care? There's a very compelling argument that'll be in the show notes from like 2015. It was in women's running. Like, yeah, cheating happens in not elite runners, but really, who cares? If anything, the egregious people are going to be caught, and that's kind of sad. Everybody else, meh. And I'm kind of that ilk. Like, you know, I'm not going to be trying to get all the bike riders. I'm not going to be mad at the people who are taking the time to get the bike riders. But there's kind of a difference between the bike riders and having to go and look up the rules because you're not familiar with it and be like, okay, yeah, that was a broken rule. You're out. There's something about that to me doesn't serve the sport, especially if the person being called out has a blog. Having some visibility does not make you an influencer or a public figure. There's a big difference between me and LaToya Snell. There's a gigantic difference between me and, I don't know, even that Instagram influencer that got called out by Amanda Seyfried a couple weeks ago. I can't remember her name because, like, I don't follow a lot of style influencers, but you know what I mean? Like, they're visible on a certain platform, but are they a public figure? I don't know. It feels like there's a big difference there to me. So it's one thing if you're a public figure, like, you need to make sure you stay above scrutiny, but if you're just visible, everyone's visible to someone. I don't know where those lines are, and maybe I'm just not aware of where I fall in there. All I can say is that, like, my husband is a rugby referee, and there is a lot of oversight for rugby referees. You are not allowed, you're not supposed to throw the rule book at people. You're supposed to only, like, enforce the rules when it interrupts the flow of the game and changes advantage. So if one team has advantage,
I didn't know that. I thought that's fascinating. That whole discussion about material advantage and
thank you. I thought so, but he really gets into it because he's a rule follower. And in the live stream, we talked about a time when he applied the rules in a way that, like, was hall monitor-ish and hard to live down. It was a personal embarrassment for him, and I appreciate him telling it. And then, like, how he's mellowed over the years, in no small part, is due to his experience as a rugby referee, where it's like, okay, guess what? You don't need to enforce all the rules. And so more senior referees come and show up with him and kind of guide him on how to be a good referee by not applying every rule in every moment. Like, actually, you changed the flow of the game here. You stopped it when you shouldn't have. And this is why I don't think that was a good call. So each referee is being watched by at least two other more senior referees at all times, even for smaller club games.
That's very hard. That requires a lot of critical thinking.
Yeah, it's a great system. That is the difference between a bunch of dudes finger pointing and a bunch of dudes, like, keeping each other in check. And it's one thing if we're all going to try to keep each other in check, I'm good with that. But I really would like a more closed forum to do it because, like, my husband has never been chastised publicly. People have complained. And there's a whole procedure where they all look out for each other, and it's a discussion, and it's a robust discussion. Like, if a call truly materially changed the outcome of the game, that's a conversation worth having, especially with a young referee. And I feel like each rule we have to kind of ask ourselves, when in the breaking of that rule, did it materially change the outcome? And if it really kind of didn't, I don't know. Disqualifying an 86-year-old runner for using an albuterol inhaler just doesn't feel right to me. It never will.
Yeah.
Telling that guy who rediscovered something in his youth later in life accidentally as a result of a drug he needed to just keep breathing as an 86-year-old. That feels gross. And I know I've already said that, but I don't think I can say it enough. That's one example of many examples that we could use if we were really going to start policing and enforcing. And more, like, some policing is good, some enforcement is great. Too much is, you know, at what point do you become the Gestapo? I don't know. But the minute I have runners that are saying, well, I really want to do this, but I'm afraid that it'll be taken away from me, then I have to wonder if we've gone a little too far. If it happened to her, if it happened to him, it could happen to me. And I'm like, you know what? Yes, it could. As your coach, I don't know what I would do about that. I don't know what I could do to stop that. It's weird. It's one thing when it's a system. It's another when that...
And when the rules and the boundaries are clear. You know, it's one thing when the rules and boundaries are clear, and it's another thing entirely when it's kind of luck. You know, whether the online mob notices you, whether you're in the wrong place in the wrong time. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah, you attract the attention of the wrong person. Absolutely.
Yeah. or someone has some kind of a grudge that they get an opportunity to act on, that's a thing that happens.
Yeah, someone jumping in and running along with a runner for a mile or two, I can understand from a race director standpoint why a race director can never sanction that. They can never be like, that's, everyone can do it. You can't say that because then it would be chaos. At the same time, my participation in a marathon, my experience has never been diluted by people doing that. Mm-hmm. If anything, it's kind of beautiful to see the human spirit. Everyone cheering each other on in a lot of different ways. So I don't know. I don't know where the line between like more and better is. All I know is that the current setup, it feels like a lot of the incentives that bothered me when I was in a post-Soviet Russia, just exploring freedom and trying to put rules and boundaries up for the very first time. My friend Carol Markowitz, who immigrated here with her family right around the time An American Tail was in theaters. Whenever I think about like rules and I think about finger pointing and I think about Soviet Russia and all the reasons that her family had to leave, somewhere out there starts playing in my head, and I just have to hate whoever made that song start. And by the way, have you seen that movie lately?
Okay, so no, I have only seen Fievel Goes West, which I think is the sequel, and I've seen that movie a gajillion times. Because my grandparents had like 5 video cassettes at their house that were for kids. The rest of them were all like rated R movies that my brother and I weren't allowed to watch. So we watched Abbott and Costello over and over again, and we watched Fievel Goes West over and over again. But the original American Tail, no, I have not seen it.
It's kind of funny to go back and watch. I tried to watch it with my children, was like, oh wow, no. I do not know how this movie ever got made. It's like, and why it's like, oh, it's a kid's movie because there are dancing mice on the screen singing songs. Like, whoa. It's funny now to think like, oh, Disney's trying to like attract grown-ups too. It's like, no, I don't think Disney had kids in mind when they made An American Tail. It's funny.
Lots of movies they make are like, this is not a kid's movie. The Incredibles 2? That was an incredibly violent movie. That movie is not for kids. I'm sorry.
My son and I have a mommy-son date on Wednesday. And I was like, he says he wants to go see a movie. I said, great. We sat down and looked and said, okay, we can go see Dumbo. No, mommy. You could go see The Lion King. No, mommy. Let's just see Toy Story 4 again. I was like, oh, okay. Why don't you want to see these others? He's like, it's too scary. I saw the trailer. It's too scary. So he's like scared of The Lion King and scared of Dumbo. But I was like, why are you scared of Dumbo? And I mean, I know why I don't like Dumbo. He's like, well...
Oh, I will not watch Dumbo.
But I just didn't. The things that scared me about Dumbo are not present in the trailer. So for him to not know the story and having never seen the movie, I'm like, what is it? I need to know, just out of curiosity, with no a priori knowledge of this. What made you look at this trailer and say, no, that movie isn't for me? And he was like, it's just so sad. They're not nice to the animals and they wouldn't let him be with his mommy. And I'm like, and I had to go back and watch the trailer twice to be like, how did you know? Because again, those 2 points are not clear to me in the trailer.
Well, I don't know, because I would not even watch the trailer, because that movie traumatized me. I remember, like, being sprawled out on the floor of my living room, bawling my eyes out at that movie, because that is the part when they won't let him be with his mommy, and his mommy's singing the song, and she's in elephant jail. I was like, no. And I have not gone back to it. And I know that, like, people talk about other parts of it being really bad, like the crows being really bad. And I don't even know what they're talking about, because I cannot get past the mom in the jail in the song. Just can't do it. So, RJ, I'm with you on that. Good choices.
Yeah, man.
I would be interested to know how he got that from the trailer too, except I'm not going to watch the trailer for sure. But at one point, I do not want it.
Once upon a time, though, that was acceptable, and people loved it, and people feel like watching it now, it's a very different movie. I'm kind of curious how that got remade.
Yeah,
but
so you're going to sit through Toy Story 4 again, is what you're saying?
Basically, yeah. I'm like, well, I get to scream, and we get to have another conversation about all the messages. I think what I might just do is take my iPad and stick in my little bitty earphones, and subtly listen to podcasts and try to pretend I'm not there. Wow. He just laughs at
that. Sounds like an amazing plan. Buzz and Woody. That sounds amazing. I'm with you on that.
Oh, wow. Whew, this was heavy. Well, this is heavy.
Yeah, this was because this, like, I don't feel like we have. I mean, I feel like with body image is heavy, but we know where we stand, I think.
Yeah.
I think we both feel very strongly about our opinions, but we also both feel like we have ways of talking about this that we feel are effective and important. And with this, I don't think either of us really knows, like, at all where this is going or our personal place in it.
Because all I know, when I studied, again, Russia, when you're studying that period, what you hear the most is you had to ask yourself, how easily could this turn against me? Because they will come for you. And so with that in mind, integrity of a sport where we have almost as much faith in the governing body. USATF is notoriously corrupt, and the IAAF, don't get me started. So if we have as much faith in them as we do, like the Politburo or the good intentions of Mussolini, then I don't know how easily it could be pointed at me or you or any of my runners. And that makes me a little sad and a little nervous. And it's really easy to look at me and just be like, well, just do your job and memorize all the rules and don't let them do anything stupid. And I'm like, I don't, if their kids want to jump in and jog with them for part of a mile.
Yeah.
I don't want to tell them that's cheating. I don't want to tell them that they could get disqualified for that, but they could. It's technically a rule violation. If somebody is flagging and they're hurting and it's 6.5 hours into the race and I'm volunteering 1.5 miles from the finish line because they've already taken down the water station and I give that person a cup of water, that could get them disqualified. That's against the rules.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to take nutrition from anyone on the course, and you absolutely no communication with your coach. It used to be one of my favorite things to do was like find a place near the finish and cheer until I was told several years ago that that's illegal and I can't do that. And back then, I was like, but I'm not coaching any of the winners. That kind of hurt. So then I made it a policy to be at the finish line and just sit there for 6 hours or 7 hours or however long it took. Rules make the game. When application makes a game better, I'm all for it. But when they don't,
Yeah. No, I think that sums it up really well. That was almost a good way to end the podcast. I was just going to tell this story, though, which is that almost 10 years ago when I ran the Marine Corps Marathon, and I've kind of laughed it off as like, it was my worst marathon ever. It was my worst marathon ever because I was flagging and I was hurting and it was mile 11 and I didn't know whether to drop out. But I was in a hole so deep in my head where if I didn't finish that race, I don't think I ever would have recovered from it. And I still don't know whether it was the right thing to do or not, but a friend of mine, really good friend of mine who I ran with, just, casually ran with in college, was there watching. She had come to watch me run that day. She came down from New York City and she was at mile 16 and she saw me and she was like, what's going on? And I was like, something hurts. And I described what I was feeling. She was like, it sounds like maybe it's your IT band. Like, tell me how bad is it? Da da da. And she was wearing clogs and jeans and had a camera around her neck. And she kind of jumped in and started jogging alongside me so that I wouldn't have to like stop. And she ended up running with me because we were going very slow because I was having a rough time. She ended up running with me almost the end. And then before we got within sight of the finish line, she was like, all right, you go. And she got out because she probably would have gotten in trouble for crossing the finish line with me even 10 years ago. I will never forget what she did for me that day. There's no way I would have finished that race without her next to me. She took a picture of me in front of the White House and I kind of turned my head and gave my biggest smile. And so it's a cute picture of me smiling in front of the White House. I had tears streaming down my face. I was in a world of mental pain. It was really, really bad. And she totally saved me. Yeah. And so I think this is one of those things where someone jumping in to run with you and someone did get called out and disqualified for a friend jumping in and running with her during a race. And that's part of what we're talking about here. I think like this is the first kind of thing that most of the people that we know and that we coach have a story where someone jumped in and ran with them. Like I think that so many of us do. This is the first one that felt very personal to me. And also like, well, so was what my friend did for me that day, was that cheating? Should I have been disqualified? Should she have been sanctioned?
Could I be banned for life from this race?
Could I be banned from the sport for life for that? Could she be banned from the sport for life for that?
Yeah. I don't know. Is that, and if so, does that make things better?
Exactly. Right.
I get that you can't say that a race director can't say it's okay for legal and insurance purposes.
Absolutely.
At the same time, don't we have better things to do than police all of that? There's so much going on because that pacer rule, that interrupts the flow of the sport in the front. When you take a rabbit or you have a friend that's helping you pace a 5:40 mile so you can win the race, that is different. That is totally different, in my opinion, than even somebody that jumps in and jogs for a mile or two to cheer them on when they're flagging or run half the race with them the way that did you. Whether the finish time is breaking 5, just finishing, or qualifying for Boston, it's all a different part of the race. It's out of the elite corral, and I just don't care to monitor that part of the race that closely as long as you're standing on your own 2 feet and not interrupting the flow for other people. Now you have 5 people around you holding a hand so that like you can't fall. That's different. That's gonna attract attention, and that's gonna like there were women that would do it. But that's where we
get into this discussion that the rugby referees have to be having in their heads at all times. Like, what effect is this having?
And if a race director says, you know what, no, we're not going to pursue that, does that mean that they're bankrupt and corrupt? And are they ruining the integrity of the sport? Or are they just, allocating their resources and their own integrity as wisely as possible? I'm not ready to say that every race director that isn't pursuing every single instance of non-obvious, non-elite cheating, is bad, wrong, or I'm not going to participate in those races. But I tell you what, there are some that I'm scared to participate in now because it's been made so clear. It's really easy to cheat here. Most people who come here are cheating. And I'm like, well, shoot. So if I'm not within a given algorithm of predicted, if I have a really good day and so I'm outside that prediction, that you could take that day away from me. Like now I've got to prove that, so you're going to come after me because I'm a public figure, but then demand that I put everything out there publicly to be judged. So if I am a public figure, I'm damned. If I'm not sharing everything publicly, then I'm lying. So if I can't win either way, I don't play. My name's Coach MK. I have ADHD. I take Adderall. It is not a performance-enhancing drug. I've taken it before. I intend to take it again. I am probably going to jump in to races when I can, when I see people that are hurting, and be like, hey, you're fine. I'm going to give people cups of water when they're thirsty. I am going to not do any of that with my elite runners because I know it's illegal. But not giving someone a cup of water when they're thirsty or trying to lift them when they're down you're not categorically a bad human. That's not how I want to be, period. And if that's against the rules, screw your rules. I don't know.
I think that's where we end.
Shiny, happy people holding hands, yay.
But not all the way across. Gotta let people go around you.
No, seriously, those chains are terrible. That used to happen in the Nike Women's Marathon in San Francisco, and I truly do believe that's one of the reasons they got rid of it, because the complaints of that were so rampant, like, we're walking together. But, that's okay. Yeah. Do that like for a picture, but don't do it the entire duration.
Yeah,
so.
And don't do it crossing the finish line, please.
Oh my God.
People, because other people will get really mad at you.
Yes.
I'll try not to be too mad at you, because I'll try to understand that you're having a great moment, but the person next to me might be really mad at you, and I can't take responsibility for what they're going to do.
No, but we can take responsibility for ending this podcast, and that's happening now. You're a coach. You are loved. Go win at the week.